about what will be the legislation. The other is we were calling again for an official inquiry into the second wave. This is Eddie Calista Tavares, so she's going to be speaking as well. Look, on the question of these 19 phantom bills that have been introduced, it's clear, if we are to believe the PC MLA for Radisson, James Teichma, that there was nothing in those bills. That basically the PCs wanted to make sure they had a whole bunch, 19 bills, they wanted to make sure that their legislation was passed when they hadn't done any of the work. So they put in a whole bunch of phony bills. It is actually incredible. Said, as he writes, in response and in defensive move, our government, quote unquote, introduced legislation early in the fall without distributing the copy to ensure the NDP couldn't prevent their introduction. The thing is, most of the legislation hadn't even been finalized at that point. The point of the introduction was to parry the NDP's tactic, sigh. This was all made eminently worse by us, the Liberals, who on the last day of session refused to allow unanimous consent to allow those bills to be distributed as they were finalized in the December, January, February timeframe. That's not how things are supposed to work. That is not how things are supposed to work. As an MLA, when I present a bill, it has to be approved by Legislative Council, it has to be translated. I don't get to throw a blank sheet of paper on the desk and say, by the way, this is going to be, I want this law passed. Count this as a law. It's a complete double standard. These bills should be thrown out. They are not bills. They should be thrown out and they need to be reintroduced properly. And if they don't pass by June, tough. Because this government screwed up big time. And they tried to pull the wool over the eyes of Manitobans and MLAs. And the only reason we found out about any of this nonsense is because we wouldn't let them bend the rules in November. We basically called their bluff. Like I used to teach at university. And when they said, well, can we get an extension on our homework? I said, no. Show your work now, or show your work in March. So it turns out, it seems, that this government basically has, it's like Lionel Hutz in The Simpsons. He basically has, they say they have a bunch of laws in a briefcase and it's nothing but a bunch of shredded newspaper. It's absolutely unbelievable that they're trying to pull this. And I will say, if James Teichma knows about this, I'm pretty certain that every single member of the PC caucus knows it as well. It's very hard to believe that he was the only person in on the fact that there was nothing in those bills when they were introduced in November. So there is a decision that's supposed to be coming down from the Speaker, because we don't actually know if there are any rules that this is allowed. So we've also written a letter to Wabkanu and the Premier to say, look, we need to change the rules. We need to change the rules to say that when you introduce a bill, it has to have content in it. It's a bit like saying that when you build a bike, it has to have wheels. But apparently that's where we're at because the PC's found a loophole that you don't actually have to do anything to claim that you're introducing a law. And the other is that at the bare minimum, we need to extend second reading if we're going to be talking about these bills at all. So look, this is, basically the PCs weren't organized. They wanted to make sure that they get rammed through 19 bills without doing any of the work. They wanted an extension and we wouldn't give it to them. This is not the way to run a government.
Is there